I've been noticing on the internet, and you probably have too, that everybody loves to kind of say this thing of everything happens for a reason, or if it's meant to be, you'll get it, or things don't happen by accident. And I always wondered about that. It always never sat right with me. I always went, no, that it sort of seemed like a way of avoiding dealing with the pain of facing when things don't go the way you want. So you want to buy a particular house and you don't get it, somebody else gets it, and it really hurts, and you go, oh well, everything happens for a reason. It's quite soothing. It's very soothing, because it kind of makes you feel like there's this benevolent plan to your life. There's this benevolent other, you can call it God, or you can call it spirit, or your higher spirit. You can call it whatever you like. But there's this nice warm feeling that soothes the whatever the opposite of a nice warm feeling is, a cold, not very nice feeling that comes with like not getting what you want. Or if something terrible happens, something tragic happens, a car crash, or you get burgled, or something like that happens, this thing of saying, oh well, everything happens for a reason. Well, it makes you feel better. Definitely. It makes you feel better in the moment. It's great. You go, everything happens for a reason. Okay, well, I don't need to feel so sick to my guts that my car was just stolen or keyed, or my child died, or my bank account is much worse than I thought it was, or whatever it is. If you say, oh well, it happened for a reason, you can feel better about it. But I wonder about that. I wonder. I'm not saying that I don't think everything happens for a reason. I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. I don't think there's any way of knowing. It's a bit like, is there life after death? It's a nice idea, and it would be great. Well, I don't know if it would be great. I think it would be great if there was life after death, but I don't know. And in the same way, you can't know if everything happens for a reason. Particularly when you look back on your life, you can see how all these different things came together in a particular way to arrive at a particular outcome. And if you tried to orchestrate those particular things, you wouldn't be able to. It would be so complicated. That kind of leads to this idea of, oh, well, that was planned. Some guiding hand guided me. And again, doesn't matter what you think, who owns the guiding hand, whether it's your own higher self, or it's God, or whoever. But if you think about how you met your partner, for example, you think about all the different things that had to happen. Like for example, for me to meet my wife, she's from Papua New Guinea. So the chances of an Irish boy meeting a woman from Papua New Guinea and falling in love and getting married, they're slim. You'd have to organise all that for that to happen. I had to take up rollerblading, that's how I met her. We met rollerblading in this group. I had to know that group, and the way that I ended up knowing that group were very circuitous. So I could look back and go, oh, it was meant to be. Our stars were crossed and all that kind of thing. And it's a lovely idea, and it's nice. Certainly Hollywood has made a lot of money out of that whole Sleepless in Seattle kind of idea of destiny, and things were meant to happen in a certain way. But I think a deeper reflection on that is required, because all sorts of awful things happen as well. So were they meant to happen? And when do you get to the point where you see the benefit of all the good things, all the bad things that were supposed to happen? For example, if you have a series of terrible things happening to you, then at what point do you look back and go, that was, I can see that was meant to be? So is there a kind of selective thing where you go, oh, well, all the good things were meant to be and all the bad things, well, they were just a bit off, they're a bit off the schedule? Or another way I've seen people sort of talk around that is to go, well, the meaning of those things, those bad things that happened to me, haven't been revealed yet. And that may be true, but if you've known anybody who died, if you had a close friend or family member who died, I have, and you know that things weren't resolved. It's not like, as they were dying, they were going, right, now I see what it was all about. Oh, I understand why that thing happened, and yeah, okay, now I get it. No, I didn't see that at all. So then I would have to sort of make myself feel good by going, well, they figured it out in the afterlife, which is, and the sense of it all, the reason for all those terrible things. Oh, that happened, they got that in the afterlife. So it seems just a bit too trite and convenient to just say everything happens for a reason. In that kind of, I'm just going to use this as a pill to, number one, make myself feel better, but number two, it also stops you thinking about it. And I think that's what I mean. That's what I meant when I was saying about it requires further reflection. Because what I've observed in myself, and particularly I saw this when treating people for craniosacral therapy, particularly people who had very serious, life-threatening conditions. But even just normal, that's what my book, Why Do We Get Sick, Why Do We Get Better? A lot of it was about this kind of question of, you have two people, and one of them, the classic one is malaria or mosquito bites and mosquito infections. I used to see this a lot in Australia. And if somebody would get Ross River fever, for example, is a common thing in Australia. And I'd be talking to them about it, and they go, okay, so you got Ross River fever, and it's like, well, did your partner get it? And they go, no, they didn't get it. And they were lying in the same bed, so the mosquito must have come in and bit, or only, bit one of them, and that person got it, which seems a bit random to me. And now, I'm sure you could go into immunity and the way Ross River fever works and the way mosquitoes work, and fine. But it's the same with people who get cancer. Some people get cancer and die. Some people get cancer and they recover. And really, the medical and scientific world, for the most part, haven't got a clue why one person gets better and one person doesn't. So, if somebody, you can imagine if somebody came to you for help. Not necessarily with cancer itself, maybe they did, and they're asking you about it. I had to think about that a lot. I had to think about why one person got better and one person didn't, and to try and get a sense of why this particular person who'd come to ask me for help had cancer, and what it meant. I think that's the thing that's missing in the everything happens for a reason thing. Is that if you just say that and leave it at that and go, everything happens for a reason, you kind of miss the meaning. Now, looking for meaning, the meaning of why things happen can drive you nuts, because often you don't get an answer. In fact, I can't remember a time when something happened and I went, what does this mean? And I immediately knew what it meant. And often you don't know what it means until a good bit of time has passed, if ever. So if it's you could say, well, that's just a variation and everything happens for a reason. You're not going to find out until the afterlife. Well, what's the point? And well, there isn't a point. But then there isn't. You could say that about life. There isn't a point to life. Looked at in a certain way, you could say, well, there isn't a point to life, because when you look about, particularly if you look into the animal world, where one animal eats another animal, and it seems very cruel and very harsh, and one country invades another country, or one person kills another person, and good, the thing of good things happen to bad people. That is true. So looked at from that perspective, you could say, well, what's the point of anything? And fine, you could say that, but it makes for a very unpleasant life. So often when you get into the whole thing of life has no meaning, you can get a bit depressed for a while, because it is kind of depressing, because everything seems a bit futile. Well, what's the point of anything? What's the point of getting up in the morning? What do I bother going to my job? I'm going to die anyway. Everyone's going to die, You see that on the internet a lot as well. No one gets out alive, So you may as well, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's true. But then I think you have to start, once, can't stop there. You have to keep going with it. You have to keep looking into it further. And you realize that the whole future death, I'm going to die, well, that happens every night anyway, as I've said before. So I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to be too concerned about dying. So if I don't have to be too concerned about dying, then, well, what is left? And really time starts to compress into the here and now. Now, it's very hard to be continuously in touch with now, because it moves so fast. But you can bring it down to 10 minutes, or half an hour. You can sort of, or just wherever you're at, at the moment. Even if you can come into where you are at the time, if you can do that, that's pretty good. Trying to come right into the now is very difficult, and it requires intense focus, because the now goes by very fast, and it is possible, but I've found it's very hard to hold it in a day-to-day life. It's very hard to be in the now and be pumping petrol into your car, or be in the now and be on the telephone to somebody, or be in the now and cooking. Or it's easy actually in things like sport and art or sex, or things where you lose yourself. Those kind of things, you can be in the now for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, depending on what you're doing. Like if you're playing tennis, which I don't do, but you can see it when you watch people, or dancing's another good one, or any kind of performance. You can there's a moment when you're watching a performance when my skin starts to tingle, or I just have the hairs in the back of my neck go up, or something. I can just sense that person, it's almost like you have a little window through existence, and you can see the being of the person behind their body coming through, and it's pretty obvious that they are not thinking about much, and that their mind, that frontal thinking, is disengaged, and it's just a very pure presence there. And I've been in that kind of thing myself, either playing a sport or doing a particular thing, where my thinking just stops, and I'm just in the now, as it's called. But as I say, that's hard to hold. So 10 minutes, if you can be in the 10 minutes, or if you can be in the half an hour, or if you can really just be wherever you are. Like I'm doing this, and I'm looking out the window here. Let's see if I can show you. Looking out the window here, and there's this lovely view of this Kerry landscape, beautiful valley that I live in, and I've got things to do later on. I've got places to go, but right now I'm just sitting here doing this podcast, and it's a lovely day. The sun is shining. It looks like it's going to cloud over a bit. The sun is shining. It's not raining, which is always like a great thing in Ireland generally. So right now it's pretty good. And coming into that sense of things being good and going, well, that there may not be any point to life, but I can focus on enjoying life the life that I'm having. Like right now, this is the life I'm having. I'm making this thing. I'm looking out the window at the lovely landscape. And I'm not ignoring it. And I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do later on. Or I'm not thinking about what I did this morning. I mean, it drifts in and out. But mostly I'm not. Mostly I'm here. And I'm enjoying here. And because I've been conditioned to think about the future and the past, I have to remind myself to enjoy now. Meaning, if I sat here long enough, I would start thinking about other things. And I could, because I've seen this view out my window. I mean, you haven't possibly seen it before, so it looks great to you. But I've seen it a few times now, so it's the things that I see regularly. It's easy to kind of take for granted. And taken for granted is one of the ways of killing your enjoyment of life, or killing my enjoyment of my life, is to stop seeing the beauty that's around me. And one way that I help myself remember it is, well, number one, I think it, but then if it's appropriate, I'll say it. Like, that's a lovely day, or that's a lovely mountain, or with my wife, I'll tell her, when I see her looking lovely, I'll say, you look lovely. Not so much physically, she looks physically lovely to me, but when she, there's a sort of sweetness coming off her, or she does some particular something, or often when she's doesn't know I'm around and she's sort of singing to herself. If I say it to her afterwards, I'd say, oh, that was lovely, or whatever. And it's for her to hear, but it's also for me to keep reminding my mind and myself, and when we're all the same thing, me and my mind, it's the same thing, but there's different parts of me on the inside, so I'll call that bit of me my mind, that even though there may not be any point to life, it's more enjoyable when I focus on the things that are good in my life. And there are metaphysical people who say that, the more you focus on the good things, the more the good things will come to you. Not sure about that. I think it's possibly true. I'd say it's probably more true than not, but it's not a hard and fast, and it certainly wouldn't be something to kind of give myself a hard time if I was feeling a bit down and I was, cursing everything and kicking the car and kicking the cat. Well, I wouldn't kick the cat, it's too fast. But you know what I'm getting at. Like, if I'm having a bad day, and if I really thought, only focusing on the good only attracts the good, then I'd be worried that I was going to attract all sorts of terrible things because I, had a momentary lapse of feeling a bit negative. So, if there's no point if there's no point to life, then why would you bother wondering about if everything happens for a reason? And there may not be, but I have found that in the same way as focusing on the good things that are in my life, holding the perspective that things do happen for a reason is helpful. Now, bear with me here. I'm not completely contradicting myself. I didn't say I was wrong. I just said you have to go into it a bit deeper. Meaning, going back to the people that I was treating with who had life-threatening illnesses, it began to dawn on me over time that everyone seemed to be dealing with something, and something very personal to themselves. And it went through their whole life, whatever they were dealing with. It's a very fundamental thing they were trying to work out in their lives. And I was in the privileged position of being able to look into other people's lives with this compassionate drive to help them. It wasn't like I was just being nosy or just, fantasizing about people's lives in my head, going, oh, I wonder why this and I wonder why that, because that's an awful trap to fall into as a therapist and as a human being. Like, hypothesizing about, what other people should do in their lives, when really if I could figure out what I was doing in my own life first, then that's much more useful. And of course, it's much harder, and that's why it's much easier to think about how other people are screwing up their lives rather than having to think about how I'm screwing up my life. Anyway, so from this position, it's always easier to look at somebody else's life and have a sense of things, because we've all got our these areas of unconsciousness that we can't see about ourselves. Barry Long used to call them blind spots, and I think that's a pretty good name. So we all have our blind spots, and the nature of a blind spot is you're unaware of it. So it's very hard to look at yourself and go, oh, this is what's going on for me, because as soon as you're conscious of something that's not unconscious anymore, you've brought it into your consciousness. So through helping people figure out what was wrong with them, and I don't mean this in an analytical way, because craniosacral work, if it's done right, is non-verbal. It happens in the depths of the therapist and the meeting of the therapist and the person who's come for help. I don't like using the word patient, because I never really thought of the people that I worked with like that. They were just people, and in a way I was just a person as well, who had the label of being the therapist. So when I'm thinking about what's running through a person's life, it's not like we sat down and talked about it at any length. And the nice thing about treating people as a craniosacral therapist was you had very immediate feedback. People either got better or they didn't, so you couldn't kind of bullshit yourself and go, oh yeah, that's it, I've totally figured it out. Because if they didn't get better, that probably wasn't right. On the other side, you'd have these wispy senses of, I think this is what's going on with this person. And then as the treatment program kind of focused on that perspective, and they start to get better, that's the only way you'd know for definite, if you can know anything for definite, that you're probably on the right track. So what is this thing that everyone's working out in their lives? It's different, as my experience is different from person to person. And viewed, a person's life viewed in that particular way, then everything does look like it has a meaning, or it serves that particular question. What everyone seems to be working out is they have a particular question that they are dealing with about themselves, and their whole lives seems to be organized around dealing with that question. Now, a thing I've noticed in myself and in other people is that we like to be certain about things and definite about things and categorize things, and this is this and that's that, and black is black and white is white. But my experience of life is that it's not like that. It's not black and white. It's not categorizable. It's pretty much made up of many, many paradoxes. And paradoxes are, to my mind and in my observation of other people, hard to deal with. Paradoxes they're uncomfortable usually. They're disturbing, because you've got to hold two opposing ideas together and see the harmony of the two, that they go together, that there is no definite answer one way or the other, and that the two ideas coexist. So the paradox of this question and looking at this, dealing with somebody who's trying to figure out what they're trying to figure out about in their lives is on the one hand holding this idea that my whole life is organized around a fundamental question that I'm trying to work out about myself. And then the contradictory side of that paradox is I may never know. I may never figure out what the question is. Because when my book about why do we get sick and why do we get better came out, I talk about this question in it, and a couple of people said to me afterwards, oh, I know what my question is. I figured it out. And I kind of, it's great if you did, but my experience of dealing with people is that it's not easy to figure it out, and I haven't seen anybody figure it out, and I certainly haven't figured it out for myself. So, but I can have a sense of the area that it is in, and I can have a sense of there are some things that are closer to it than others. Some issues are closer to it than other issues, and it generally circles the question. And obviously, it's easier, as I say, because with blind spots and whatnot, it's easier to look at somebody else's life and get a sense of what that question might be. But certainly when I'm training craniosacral therapists, I encourage them strongly not to get into trying to figure it out for somebody else, and certainly not tell them what their theory is, because it's highly disrespectful, number one, and it's probably not right. Because if you can't know what your own question is and what it is that you're working out in your own life, then you can't do it for somebody else. All you can do is when you're listening to somebody talking about it, you can get a sense of if they're in the right area or not. But the point isn't so much to arrive at the answer to the question. It's just a way of looking at your life. And as I said before, it could be completely wrong. I don't know if everyone is dealing with the question in their life. It all could be chaotic and random. But as I say, choosing to look at the world in that way and choosing to look at my life in that way, it's a bit depressing and it's not very enjoyable. So I choose not to look at it from that perspective. I choose to look at it from the perspective of this thing that everybody is working out a fundamental question about themselves, including me. And in my own life, this whole feeling of like being in tune with the movement of my life and being out of tune with the movement of my life, I have lots of experience of that, particularly the latter, being out of tune. And maybe it's that thing of, I saw it somewhere the other day, how do you make the way you make good choices is by making lots of bad choices. You get experience, basically. So I've had experience of being out of tune, of doing things that seemed good on paper, that seemed like, oh yes, well I will do this and I will do that. And then 2 and 2 will add up to 4, and then 4 will give me the result that I think will make me happy. Now, I probably didn't use those words, it will make me happy, because they sound like, a 10-year-old's version of life. But that's really what was going on the inside. And as I look at other people, I think that's what's going on as well. We like to think we're all sophisticated and grown up, and yes, I'll get my superannuation organised, and then, my retirement plan will be great, or I'll get that raise, and then that will secure mine, and I'll be able to get a mortgage, and so on and so forth. And really, my experience is like that kind of approach to my life hasn't worked. I've ended up in situations where I joined all the dots, but it didn't make a nice picture. It made an unhappy, for a moment-to-moment unhappy kind of life. Whereas not going with that, going with, on the inside, going with a more, I suppose, intuitive approach, or kind of get a sense of what the direction of my life was, and trying to get in tune with that rather than trying to bend it to my will, has certainly given me a lot more moments of pleasure than when I was trying to be clever and I'll do this for a year and then that thing, or I'll choose this thing over that other thing because it makes more sense on paper. I mean, the downside of it is living with uncertainty on a daily basis, which it gives my mind a lot of space to worry about things and to be concerned about my future. But on balance with that horrible feeling of sort of having a sense of being in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing, just dealing with my mind, worrying about the future is well, I can handle that. So viewing my life from the perspective of that there is a central question that I'm working out, then when I look at events, instead of kind of something happens and I go, oh, there was a reason for that, or everything has a reason, I'll be going, I wonder what that meant. Now, instead of driving myself nuts, what does it mean? What does it mean? If it's taking the perspective of, if I take the perspective that there is some fundamental thing I'm working out in my life about myself, then this has happened to help me. I've drawn this event to me, or I've drawn this person to me, or I've drawn this circumstance to me to help me deal with this, to help me look at it, to help me see myself in a particular way, so that I can work through this question some more. Now, when I say the question, some of the things I observed in the people I helped with as a craniosacral therapist were the sort of things of like somebody who is very powerful, for example, and they're living a very small life. They've got you could say everyone's powerful, but just to give you an idea of the sort of things I'm talking about. Someone who's say they're a very powerful person, yet they're living a very meek, fearful little life. Now, that's not me judging them going, hey, you're really powerful, you should be living a bigger life. They would come to me because they were sick and they were trying to deal with the disharmony in their system. And the disharmony, the root cause of the disharmony, it wasn't always the case, but in some cases it was down at this very deep level of this question that they had about themselves, which may have been, if it was to be verbalized, would be something like, am I as powerful as I think I am? Am I really that powerful? Or something to do with power. That's what I mean about, you can have a sense of it and that you're kind of circling it and working issues relate to it, but don't, you may not be right on the target with it. And the point in the whole thing of being right on the target, I'm not sure if that is the point. As I was saying, like those people saying, "Oh, I know what my question is." It's more of a perspective. It's another way, I suppose, of soothing myself when things happen. But I mean, there are some things in my life that have happened that I can't see any benefit to them at all. I can't see any value or any. They just were bad, unpleasant things, and I can't kind of go, oh well, there was a plan there. But what does make it a bit easier it doesn't make it easier, but in terms of the pain, it doesn't diminish the pain at all. But I can kind of look at them and go, I wonder how that tied in. I wonder what the point of that. I wonder why did I draw that to myself. And again, I must stress, like if you do adopt this kind of thing, this is not a recipe for giving yourself a hard time, and it's certainly not a recipe for folding your arms and looking at somebody else and going, "Oh, well, what did he draw that into his life for?" It's not an excuse to be judgmental. It's just an approach. It's just a perspective, and it's not like a truth. It's not like this is how the world works. Could be completely wrong, but I find it useful. I've found it useful practically in treating people and dealing with people. And it helps me not be judgmental, because what everybody's working out is very personal to them. And I don't know it. You can get a sense of it when you see things happen with people and you go, God, that's weird. Why did that happen for them? And you can kind of get a sense of, yeah, I think that sort of seems like it's part of their story, what's gone on for them, what they're working out in their reality, as I talked about in other podcasts. And then for me in my own reality, it's this thing of I wonder what that means. I wonder how that fits. And if I'm lucky, maybe in a week or 2 weeks, I might have a sense of, oh, okay, I think I get a sense of what that was. Often it's like a nudge. I'll be nudging myself. Some part of me will be nudging me in a particular direction or not. Okay, so that's enough about everything happens for a reason. I'll finish off. I saw, I think what started me thinking about this was I saw a poster. It was like a meme on the internet. It had everything happens for a reason written on it. And then the last three words were crossed out. It was written in 4 lines. Everything happens for a reason. The last 2 lines were crossed out. So it just said, so all that was left was everything happens. There was a big extra there for a reason. And I thought, yeah, that's brilliant. That's true. That's the only thing you can definitely say is everything happens. Okay, so on that I will leave you.
I've never felt this good in my entire life.